I used to believe in rules. Work hard, be honest, do the right thing. The system rewards integrity. That's what I believed before James Patterson, before he fired me for saying no, before he made 47 companies believe I was the problem, before I learned that powerful men don't play by rules, they make them. Now I was standing in a crowded Boston cafe, with my 5-year-old daughter soaked from summer rain, $127 to my name, and nowhere left to go. Every table was full except one. The man sitting there looked up and met my eyes. And in that split second, I made a choice that would destroy everything I thought I knew about power, rules, and what happens when you have nothing left to lose. I approached the table with Grace's hand in mine. The man didn't look up from his laptop, fingers moving across the keyboard with the precision of someone who controlled everything around him. "Excuse me," I said. My voice barely carried over the cafe noise. I cleared my throat and tried again. "Can I share this table?" He looked up. Blue eyes met mine with an intensity that made me want to step back. His gaze shifted briefly to Grace, who was hiding behind my legs, then returned to me. For a moment he seemed to be calculating something I couldn't read. "Only if I pay the bill," he said. His voice was deep, carrying an authority that suggested he wasn't accustomed to hearing the word no. My cheeks flushed. "That's not necessary. We can pay for our own meal," I insist. He closed his laptop with deliberate precision and extended his hand. "Petros Diamantidis." I hesitated before shaking it. His grip was firm but controlled. "Charlotte Delmer, and this is Grace." He gestured to the empty chairs across from him. "Please, sit." I helped Grace into her seat and sat down opposite him. Every instinct told me to refuse his offer, but pride wouldn't feed my daughter. The waitress approached within seconds, and Petros ordered coffee for himself before turning his attention to us. "Chicken nuggets and apple juice, please," Grace said, suddenly finding her voice when food was involved. "I'll just have a small salad," I added, deliberately choosing one of the least expensive items on the menu. Petros raised an eyebrow. "Add a club sandwich to the lady's order," he told the waitress, who nodded and left. "I didn't ask for a sandwich," I said, feeling irritation flicker beneath my carefully maintained composure. "You look like you could use more than just a salad," he replied matter-of-factly. "The interview didn't go well." I stiffened. "How did you—" "Portfolio bag." Formal attire that's slightly worn. The look of someone who's been disappointed too many times. He shrugged. "I make it my business to read people." "And what business is that exactly?" I asked, trying to regain some control over this conversation that had already slipped away from me. "I run Diamantidis Construction," he said casually, as if everyone should recognize the name. I did recognize it. Diamantidis Construction owned half the skyline in Boston. The new waterfront development, the renovated historical district, the luxury condominiums that I could never afford. And now I realized with a sinking feeling, the building where I'd interviewed this morning. "You're that Diamantidis?" I asked, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. A hint of a smile played at the corners of his mouth. "The very same." Grace, who had been quietly observing the adults with her usual careful attention, suddenly piped up, "My mommy is the best designer in the whole world." Petros turned his full attention to my daughter. His expression softened in a way I hadn't expected. "Is that so?" "Uh-huh." Grace nodded enthusiastically. "She makes pretty pictures for computers, but nobody wants to hire her because they're stupid." "Grace," I admonished, though I couldn't help the small smile that threatened to break through my embarrassment. "Well, I think the people who didn't hire your mom might have made a mistake," Petros said to Grace before looking back at me with renewed interest. "Graphic design? What's your specialty?" "Brand identity and visual strategy," I replied, surprised by his genuine interest. "I worked for Patterson and Brown for 5 years before they downsized last winter." Recognition flickered in his eyes. "They did some impressive work. Do you have samples with you?" Before I could answer, our food arrived. Grace immediately dove into her chicken nuggets, temporarily forgetting the conversation around her. I hesitated, then reached into my weathered tote bag and pulled out my tablet. "These are some of my recent projects," I said, unlocking the screen and passing it to him. Petros took the tablet and began scrolling through my portfolio with the same intense focus he'd given his laptop earlier. I watched nervously as he examined my work, his expression unreadable. I used the opportunity to study him more closely. Despite his commanding presence, there was something else there. A weariness around his eyes, perhaps, the kind that came from carrying weight that others couldn't see. His suit was immaculate, perfectly tailored. His watch was subtle but clearly expensive. Everything about him screamed power and control, yet he sat alone in a cafe on a rainy afternoon. "This is exceptional work," he said finally, pausing on a comprehensive rebranding campaign I'd done for a local brewery. "Very good, actually." He handed the tablet back to me, and for a moment our fingers brushed. I pulled back quickly, pretending to adjust Grace's napkin. "Why hasn't someone snapped you up yet?" he asked. I took a bite of the sandwich to buy myself time before responding. The truth was complicated and humiliating. The market's competitive, and I have limitations on my availability. "Single mother," he said, nodding toward Grace, who was now happily drawing on a children's menu with crayons the waitress had brought over. "Yes. No flexible hours offered or remote work options," I explained. "Most places want someone in office 9 to 6. Sometimes later. After-school care is expensive, and Grace's father isn't in the picture to help." A shadow passed over Petrus's face at the mention of Grace's father. He glanced at his watch, subtle but clearly expensive, and then looked out the window at the rain, which had finally begun to let up. "Diamantides Construction is launching a new division focusing on sustainable residential development," he said suddenly. "We need to establish a distinctive brand identity separate from our corporate work. Our current marketing department is adequate for our existing needs, but this project requires a fresh perspective." My heart began to race. "Are you offering me a job, Mr. Diamandis?" "I'm offering you an opportunity to pitch for a contract," he clarified. "We're interviewing design firms next week. I can add you to the schedule." Hope bloomed in my chest. Dangerous and terrifying. Years of disappointment had taught me to be cautious. "Why would you do that? You don't know me." His gaze shifted to Grace, who was now humming softly as she colored. "Let's just say I recognize talent when I see it. And I appreciate people who maintain their standards even under pressure." Something in his tone suggested there was more to it than that. But before I could inquire further, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. "Wednesday, 2 p.m. Ask for me at reception." He slid the card across the table. As I took it, our fingers brushed again. This time I felt an unexpected jolt of electricity at the contact and quickly pulled my hand back, flustered. Petrus appeared completely unfazed as he signaled for the check. "Don't thank me yet," he warned, his businesslike demeanor returning. "You'll be competing against established firms with resources you don't have. I expect excellence." "I understand," I said, clutching the card like it was a lifeline. "Which in many ways, it was." He stood, leaving cash on the table that was clearly more than enough to cover our meal and a generous tip. "Wednesday," he repeated. "Don't be late." And then he was gone, leaving me sitting there with my daughter, a half-eaten sandwich, and the first real hope I'd felt in 6 months. Grace looked up from her drawing. "I like him, Mommy. He has nice eyes." I looked down at the business card in my hand. Petros Diamantidis, CEO, Diamantidis Construction. She was right about his eyes, but what she couldn't see, what I was only beginning to understand, was that those eyes held secrets I couldn't begin to imagine. Wednesday arrived faster than I expected. I dropped Grace at Mrs. Rivera's apartment and took the T to downtown, clutching my portfolio bag like a shield. Diamantidis Construction occupied floors 15 through 20 of the Harrington Tower, one of the most prestigious addresses in Boston's financial district. The reception area was all marble and glass, intimidatingly beautiful. A receptionist with perfect makeup looked up as I approached. "Charlotte Delmer. I have a 2 o'clock with Mr. Diamantidis." She made a call, spoke quietly, then smiled. 19th floor, he's expecting you." The elevator ride felt too short. When the doors opened, a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor was waiting. "Miss Delmer, I'm Sophia Andrianakis, Mr. Diamantidis' executive assistant. This way, please." She led me through an open office space where people worked with quiet efficiency. Everything was impeccably organized, from the arranged desks to the precisely hung artwork on the walls. It made my Type 1 heart both appreciate the order and feel inadequate about my own chaotic life. Petros' office was corner-positioned with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. He stood when I entered, buttoning his suit jacket in a gesture that seemed automatic. "Charlotte, right on time. You said not to be late," I replied, setting my bag down carefully. "And you listened to instructions." "Good." He gestured to the conference table. "Show me what you've prepared." I spent the next 45 minutes presenting my vision for his sustainable development brand. I'd worked every night after Grace went to bed, researching Diamantidis Construction's history, their market position, their competition. I'd created 3 complete brand concepts, each with logos, color palettes, messaging strategies, and sample applications. Petros listened without interrupting, his blue eyes tracking every slide, every detail. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and studied me for a long moment. "This is extraordinary work," he said finally. "Better than what I've seen from firms with 10 times your resources." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you. I believe in doing things correctly, even when no one's watching." "I can see that." He stood and walked to the windows, hands in his pockets. "The other firms I'm interviewing will take 3 weeks to deliver initial concepts. You've already done it in 3 days." "I needed this opportunity," I said honestly. I wasn't going to waste it with half measures. He turned back to face me. "I want to hire you. Not for a contract, full-time, as my director of brand strategy for the new division." My heart stopped. "Full-time? I told you, I have limitations. Remote work, flexible hours. You come to the office when necessary, but most of your work can be done from anywhere." He named a salary that was almost double what I'd made at Patterson & Brown. Plus benefits, health insurance for you and Grace. It was too good, too perfect. Years of disappointment had taught me that when something seemed too perfect, there was always a catch. "Why?" I asked. "You could hire anyone, someone without complications." Petros walked back to the table and sat on its edge, closer to me than was strictly professional. "Because you're brilliant at what you do. Because you maintain your integrity even when it costs you. And because I need someone I can trust." Trust. The word felt loaded coming from him. "I ran a background check," he continued. "Standard procedure for all hires." My blood ran cold. "You what?" "I know about Patterson & Brown. I know why you were really fired. And I know what James Patterson did to your reputation afterward." Rage flooded through me, hot and immediate. I stood so quickly my chair scraped against the floor. "You had no right to investigate my personal life." "I have every right to know who I'm hiring," he said calmly, which only made my anger burn hotter. "There's a difference between a background check and digging into private matters. What happened at Patterson & Brown is protected by an NDA I was forced to sign. You violated my privacy." "I violated nothing. The information is there if you know where to look. And I always know where to look." This was exactly what I'd feared. Another powerful man who thought he could cross any boundary because he had the resources to do it. I grabbed my portfolio bag, hands shaking with fury. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Diamantidis, but I can't work for someone who doesn't respect basic professional boundaries. I may be desperate, but I'm not desperate enough to repeat the same mistake twice." I turned toward the door. "Charlotte, wait." Something in his voice made me pause, though I didn't turn around. "You're right," he said quietly. "I crossed a line. I'm used to having access to information. And I forgot that not everyone appreciates that approach. I apologize." I did turn then, surprised. In my experience, men like him didn't apologize. "I want you to work for me because you're talented," he continued. "Not because I have leverage, not because you're desperate, because you're the best I've seen, and I only work with the best." "Then why dig into my past?" "Because Patterson & Brown called me 3 days ago, asked me not to hire you, suggested you had professional conduct issues." His expression hardened. "I don't take well to being told what to do. So I found out the truth, that you rejected James Patterson's advances, and he punished you for it, that he's been systematically destroying your career to cover his own misconduct." The room seemed to tilt. "He called you?" "He did, and he made a critical mistake." "What mistake?" Petros' smile was dangerous. "He assumed I would care about his opinion. He assumed wrong." I sat back down slowly, processing this information. "So you want to hire me despite James Patterson?" "I want to hire you because you're exceptional at your job. The fact that it will infuriate Patterson is simply a bonus." He moved back to his chair and sat, returning to a more professional distance. "But I understand if my methods have made you uncomfortable. The offer stands. Take time to think about it." I looked at this man, the stranger who had somehow learned my worst secret and was offering me salvation anyway. Every instinct screamed caution, but those same instincts had told me to be cautious with Patterson, and I'd still ended up destroyed. Maybe it was time to try a different approach. "If I accept," I said carefully, "I need your word that you'll respect my boundaries. Professional and personal. No more investigations. No surprises. If you want to know something about me, you ask. He met my eyes steadily. You have my word. And if you break that word, then you walk away, and I'll write you a reference that will get you hired anywhere you want to go. It was the most honest thing anyone in power had said to me in months. I'll need a contract. In writing. With those terms specified, Sophia will have it ready by tomorrow morning. I took a breath, looked at the harbor beyond the windows, thought about Grace, about the stack of overdue bills, about 47 rejections and 6 months of humiliation. And I thought about doing things the right way, the correct way, the way I'd always believed should work, and how that had failed me completely. Maybe it was time to try something different. When do I start? I asked. Petrus's smile was genuine this time. Monday, 9 a.m. Sophia will show you to your office. I stood and extended my hand. Thank you, Mr. Diamantidis. He shook it firmly. Call me Petros. We're going to be working closely together. As I left his office, I felt lighter than I had in months. I had a job. A real job, with a man who seemed to respect boundaries when called on them. I didn't know then what I was really walking into. I didn't know that Petros Diamantidis built more than buildings. And I had no idea how deep his world actually went. The first 2 weeks at Diamantidis Construction were exactly what I needed. Professional, structured, correct. Petros had been true to his word. Sophia sent me the contract within 24 hours, and every boundary I'd requested was spelled out in clear legal language. I worked from home 4 days a week, coming into the office only on Wednesdays for team meetings. The salary hit my bank account on time. Health insurance cards arrived for Grace and me. For the first time in 6 months, I could breathe. My office on the 19th floor was small but perfectly appointed. Standing desk, ergonomic chair, 2 monitors, everything I needed to do exceptional work, which was exactly what I intended to deliver. The sustainable development project was challenging in the best way. I threw myself into creating a brand that would stand apart from Diamantidis Construction's corporate image, while maintaining enough connection to leverage their reputation. I worked late into the nights after Grace went to bed, perfecting every detail until it met my standards. Petros was an ideal client. He gave clear direction, trusted my expertise, and provided feedback that was direct without being dismissive. Our Wednesday meetings were efficient and productive. He never crossed the professional boundaries we'd established. But there were things that didn't quite add up. Small things at first. The kind of details that most people wouldn't notice, but my Type 1 brain cataloged them automatically. Security, for instance. Diamantidis Construction had more security than any development firm I'd ever seen. Cameras everywhere, keycard access to every floor, guards who looked more like military than rent-a-cops. When I'd asked Sophia about it, she'd smiled and said, Mr. Diamantidis takes safety very seriously. Then there were the late meetings. Petros's calendar was visible to me through our shared project management system, and I'd noticed a pattern. Every Tuesday and Thursday he had meetings blocked from 8 p.m. to midnight. No details, no attendees listed, just PM meeting in his calendar. And the phone calls in Greek. I'd been in his office 3 times when his phone rang and he'd answered in rapid Greek, his tone changing from the controlled English he used with me to something sharper, more commanding. He'd always excused himself, stepping into the hallway or his private conference room. I told myself it was none of my business. He was Greek. He probably had international clients. The construction business was competitive. Of course he needed good security. But my instincts, the same ones that had failed me with Patterson, kept whispering that something wasn't quite right. It was the 3rd Wednesday when everything shifted. I arrived at the office for our weekly meeting to find Sophia looking stressed, which was unusual. She was normally unflappable. Miss Delmer, I'm sorry, but Mr. Diamantidis has been delayed. He asked if you could wait in his office. He'll be here within the hour. I settled into one of the chairs facing his desk and pulled out my tablet to review my presentation. But 30 minutes turned into 45, and I found myself standing to stretch, walking to the windows to look out at the harbor. That's when I noticed the file on his desk. It wasn't open. It wasn't obviously confidential. But the tab label was visible. Riverside Development, Permits and Acquisitions. I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't have looked. But Riverside was the project I'd been hired to brand, and my Type 1 need for information, for understanding, for having all the correct details, made me step closer. Just to see the tab. Just to make sure I had the right project name for my presentation. The folder was thick, filled with documents that I could see through the transparent cover. Property deeds. permit applications, but also photographs. Not of buildings or land, but of people. Men in suits standing outside what looked like a warehouse. Another photo of the same warehouse at night, lights on inside, and handwritten notes in Greek on a yellow legal pad clipped to the inside cover. Find anything interesting? I spun around. Petros stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. I didn't open it, I said quickly. I was just looking at the tab to confirm the project name. He walked into the office and closed the door behind him. But you were curious. I was doing my job, making sure I had the correct information. That's not what you were doing. He moved to the desk and picked up the file, studying me over it. You were trying to understand why a development project needs photographs of people and notes in a language you don't speak. My heart pounded. I should go. We can reschedule the meeting. Sit down, Charlotte. It wasn't a request. I sat. Petros placed the file in a drawer and locked it. Then he moved around the desk and leaned against it, arms crossed, looking down at me. I'm going to tell you something, and you're going to have a choice to make. Every muscle in my body tensed. Diamond Teddy's construction is a legitimate business. Everything we do with buildings, development permits, and construction is completely legal and above board. Okay, I said carefully. But my family has other interests, other businesses, some of which operate in areas that are less structured. The room felt too small suddenly. What kind of areas? The kind that don't appear in quarterly reports. I stood up. I need to leave. You're free to go, he said calmly. But if you do, you need to understand what that means. It means I'm not comfortable working for someone involved in illegal activities. It means you're walking away from the only job you've been able to get in 6 months. It means going back to 47 rejections and $127 in your bank account. It means James Patterson wins. The words hit like a physical blow. That's not fair, I said. No, it's not. But it's the truth. He pushed off the desk and walked to the windows. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal, Charlotte. The branding work you're doing is for the legitimate development side. You'll never be asked to touch anything connected to my family's other interests, but I'll know about them. Yes, you'll know. Why are you telling me this? You could have just kept it hidden. He turned to face me. 'Cause you're not the type of person who can live with lies. You're too honest, too principled. Eventually you would have figured it out, and then you'd feel betrayed. This way you have a choice. With full information, some choice. Work for a criminal or starve. I'm not a criminal. I'm a businessman who operates in multiple spheres. His tone hardened slightly, and before you judge too harshly, remember that the legitimate business world didn't protect you. James Patterson played by all the legal rules when he destroyed your career. The system you believe in failed you completely. I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, but he wasn't. If I stay, I said slowly, I need your word that I'm never involved in anything illegal, that my work stays clean. You have it, and if I ever feel uncomfortable, I can leave. No threats, no consequences. Agreed. He moved back to his desk and pulled out a piece of paper. I'll add an addendum to your contract. You can leave at any time, for any reason, with 3 months severance and a reference. I looked at this man who was offering me everything I needed while admitting he lived in shadows. I didn't understand. I have a daughter, I said quietly. She's the only thing that matters. If anything you do puts her at risk. Nothing I do will ever touch Grace, he interrupted firmly. I give you my word on that. And my word, Charlotte, is the only currency that matters in my world. I thought about Grace. About the health insurance that meant she could see a doctor when she needed one. About the apartment I could actually afford now. About having enough money for dance classes she'd been begging for. And I thought about my principles. About doing things the right way. About how the right way had left me broken and desperate. I need time to think, I said. Take until Monday. If you don't come in, I'll understand. I gathered my things and left without another word. That night, Grace had a fever. Nothing serious, but enough that I had to take her to urgent care. The bill was $230. Before Diamanitis construction, that would have been a catastrophe. Now, with my new health insurance, I paid $15. As I sat in the waiting room with Grace sleeping against my shoulder, I made my decision. The world wasn't black and white. I'd learned that the hard way. Sometimes you had to work in the gray to survive. And as long as my work stayed clean, as long as Grace stayed safe, maybe that was enough. Monday morning, I showed up at 9 a.m. Petros was waiting in my office. He didn't say anything, just nodded once. I need the addendum to my contract, I said. In writing, today. Sophia already has it prepared. And I need your word, again, that Grace stays protected. Always. You have it. Always. I set down my bag and turned on my computer. Then let's get to work. As he left my office, I saw something in his expression that I hadn't seen before. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. One person who had been forced to compromise their ideals, recognizing another. I didn't know then that I'd just crossed a line I could never uncross. I didn't know that working in the gray was different from seeing it from a distance. And I had no idea that the protection Petros had promised would be tested far sooner than either of us expected. 3 weeks into my new normal, I'd established a rhythm that almost felt sustainable. Work from home Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Office on Wednesdays. Grace at school during the day. Mrs. Rivera watching her until I finished work. Dinners together. Bedtime stories, the kind of routine I'd been chasing for months. The sustainable development branding was coming together beautifully. I'd presented the final logo concepts to Petros and the executive team, and they'd approved my top choice with minimal changes. Now I was deep into building out the complete brand system, creating guidelines for everything from business cards to billboard designs. It was good work, important work. Work that had nothing to do with whatever else Petros's family did in the shadows. I'd made peace with that separation. Or at least I'd convinced myself I had. Petros remained professional. Our Wednesday meeting stayed focused on the project. He never mentioned our conversation about his family's other interests, and I didn't ask. The boundary was clear, and I was grateful for it. But small things kept happening that blurred the lines I'd drawn. The first was the flowers. I arrived home on a Tuesday to find a massive arrangement on my doorstep. Peonies, my favorite, though I'd never told him that. The card read simply, "Excellent work on the logo presentation. P." They were beautiful. They were also completely inappropriate for a professional relationship. I brought them inside anyway. The second was the car seat. I'd mentioned in passing during a Wednesday meeting that Grace had outgrown her booster seat, and I needed to buy a new one. I hadn't asked for help. Hadn't even implied I needed it. It was just conversation, the kind of small talk that happens when you work closely with someone. 2 days later, a top-of-the-line convertible car seat arrived at my apartment. 5-star safety ratings. The exact model I'd been researching but couldn't afford yet. I called him immediately. "You can't send me gifts," I said without preamble when he answered. "It's not a gift. It's a safety measure. Grace rides in your car when you come to the office. If something happened because she wasn't in a proper seat, that would be a liability for the company. That's a corporate excuse for a personal gesture. Perhaps, are you going to return it?" I looked at the car seat, still in its box. At Grace, who was running around the living room making airplane noises. At the booster seat I'd been using, which was technically still safe but definitely past its prime. "No," I admitted. "Good. I'll see you Wednesday." He hung up before I could argue further. The third incident was harder to dismiss. I was working from home on a Thursday when my laptop crashed. Not just froze, completely died. Blue screen of death, wouldn't restart. 6 hours of unsaved work, potentially gone. I was in the middle of panicking when my phone rang. "Petros," Sophia said. "Your laptop stopped connecting to the server. What happened?" "It crashed. I don't know if I lost everything. I need to find a repair shop that can recover the files, but I can't afford." "I'm sending someone. They'll be there in 20 minutes. "Petros, you don't need to." "Charlotte, 20 minutes." He hung up again. 18 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. A young man in a Diamantidis construction polo shirt stood there with a laptop bag and a toolkit. "Miss Delmer? I'm Alex from IT. Mr. Diamantidis sent me to fix your computer." He had my laptop working within 30 minutes. All my files recovered. He also upgraded my RAM, installed new security software, and showed me how to set up automatic cloud backups. "No charge," he said when I asked about billing. "Company equipment. Company maintenance." Except it wasn't company equipment. It was my personal laptop. After Alex left, I sat staring at my phone. I should call Petros and establish boundaries again. Tell him to stop solving my problems without asking. Make it clear that I could handle my own life. But Grace needed to be picked up from Mrs. Rivera's in 15 minutes. I had a deadline in 3 hours and my laptop was working perfectly now. I sent a text instead. "Thank you for sending Alex, but this can't keep happening. His response came immediately. Noted. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Friday evening, I was making dinner when there was a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and Mrs. Rivera always called before coming over. I opened it to find Petros standing in my hallway, holding a bag from an expensive Greek restaurant. "What are you doing here?" I asked, too surprised to be polite. "You mentioned you'd never had real Greek food. I thought Grace might enjoy moussaka. How did you get my address?" "It's in your employment file." "That's not an answer to why you're here." Grace appeared behind me, peeking around my legs. "Mr. Petros, did you bring the food?" He smiled at her. That same softening I'd seen in the cafe. "I did. Your mother said you like trying new things." "I do." Grace tugged on my hand. "Mommy, can he stay for dinner? Please?" Every instinct told me to say no. This was my home, my private space, the one place that was separate from Diamantida's construction and everything that came with it. But Grace was looking at me with those hopeful eyes, and Petros was standing there with enough food to feed 6 people, and I was so tired of being the person who always said the right thing and ended up alone anyway. "Fine," I said, stepping back. "But just this once." Petros's smile suggested he knew it wouldn't be just once. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. Petros explained each dish to Grace, telling her about Greece and his family's traditions. She was fascinated, asking 1,000 questions the way 5-year-olds do. He answered each one with genuine patience. I watched him with my daughter and saw a side of him I'd only glimpsed before. Not the controlled businessman. Not the man who admitted his family had shadowy interests. Just someone who remembered what it was like to be a child learning about the world. After Grace went to bed, Petros helped me clean up. We worked in comfortable silence, him washing dishes while I dried and put them away. "You're good with her," I said finally. "I like children. They're honest. They say what they mean. Unlike adults. Unlike most adults." He handed me a plate. "You say what you mean. It's one of the things I admire about you." The compliment hung in the air between us. I focused on drying the plate, very aware of how small my kitchen was, how close we were standing. "Petros," I said carefully. "The flowers. The car seat. Showing up at my apartment. These things need to stop." "Why?" "Because they're not professional. Because they blur boundaries that need to stay clear." He turned off the water and faced me. "What if I don't want the boundaries to stay clear?" My heart stopped. "You're my boss. I'm aware." "Then you know this is inappropriate." "Is it?" "I'm not Patterson, Charlotte. I'm not leveraging power to force you into something you don't want. I'm simply being honest about my interest." "Your interest," I repeated flatly. "In you, as more than an employee." I set down the dish towel, needing space. "I can't do this. I have Grace to think about. I have a job I desperately need. I can't risk either of those things. For what? For whatever this is." He moved closer, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat of him. "This is me respecting you enough to be direct. I'm attracted to you. I enjoy your company. I'd like to spend more time with you. If you feel nothing, tell me now, and I'll maintain professional distance." I should have said I felt nothing. Should have lied cleanly and preserved the safety of boundaries. But I'd spent 6 months lying to myself about Patterson, ignoring warning signs, and it had destroyed me. I was done with lies. Even comfortable ones. "I can't," I said. Instead, "I can't feel this. I can't want this. It's too complicated. Too risky. Too honest?" "Yes," I admitted, the word barely a whisper. "Then we have a problem," he said quietly. "Because I don't do complicated well. I prefer clear lines and defined rules. But with you, Charlotte, every line keeps blurring, and I find I don't mind at all." The air between us felt electric, dangerous. One step forward from either of us, and something would break that couldn't be fixed. I stepped back instead. "I need you to leave," I said. "I need to think. About us? About whether there can be an us? About whether I can afford for there to be an us?" He nodded slowly. "I'll go. But Charlotte?" "Yes?" "I'm a patient man. I've built an empire by knowing when to push and when to wait. With you, I'm willing to wait." After he left, I stood in my kitchen for a long time, staring at the dishes we'd washed together, at the Greek food containers still on the counter, at the life I'd carefully constructed and the man who was systematically dismantling every wall I'd built. Grace appeared in the hallway, rubbing her eyes. "Is Mr. Patros gone?" "Yes, baby. Back to bed." I like him. Mommy, he's nice to us. I know you do. Do you like him? The question hung in the air. Simple. Direct. The way children ask things. It's complicated, sweetheart. Grown-up complicated or regular complicated? I smiled despite everything. Grown-up complicated. Those are the worst kind, she said sagely, making me laugh. After I tucked her back in, I returned to the kitchen and pulled out my phone, typed a message, deleted it, typed another. Finally, I sent, I need clear boundaries. Professional only. Can you do that? His response came 3 minutes later. If that's what you need, yes, but know that I'll be here when you're ready for something different. I stared at the message for a long time. The problem was, I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready, or worse, I was afraid I already was. 2 weeks passed in careful professional distance. Petros kept his word. Our interactions stayed strictly business. No more flowers. No more surprise visits. Wednesday meetings were efficient and productive. It should have been exactly what I wanted. Instead, I found myself missing the blurred lines, the moments when he'd look at me and I'd see something beyond the controlled businessman. The electricity that had filled my small kitchen. I buried those thoughts in work. The sustainable development brand was nearly complete. We were days away from the public launch, a press conference that would introduce Petros's new division to the Boston market. Everything was going according to plan. Then James Patterson called. I didn't recognize the number, so I answered. Big mistake. Charlotte. It's been a while. His voice made my skin crawl. I hadn't heard it in 7 months, but my body remembered. Remembered the careful way he'd said my name. The implications beneath every word. How did you get this number? I have my ways. I hear you're working for Diamantidis now. That's none of your business. Actually, it is my business. Petros and I are bidding on the same waterfront project. Funny coincidence, don't you think? My blood ran cold. What do you want, James? I want you to know that I haven't forgotten what you cost me. The clients I lost after you left. The reputation damage. I cost you? You fired me for refusing to sleep with you. That's an interesting version of events. Not the one I'll tell the zoning commission when they're deciding between my firm and Diamantidis. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you. Business is business, Charlotte, and you're on the wrong side. He hung up. I sat frozen at my desk, phone still in my hand. This was just Patterson being Patterson, posturing, trying to intimidate me like he'd done before. But something felt different this time. More dangerous. I should have called Petros immediately. Should have told him about the threat. Instead, my Type 1 brain kicked in. Document. Gather information. Understand the full situation before acting. I pulled up the waterfront project Patterson had mentioned. Sure enough, both Patterson and Brown and Diamantidis Construction had submitted bids. The zoning commission would decide in 3 weeks. And if Patterson was bringing me into it, that meant he planned to use my employment against Petros somehow. I was researching zoning commission members when Sophia called. Charlotte, Mr. Diamantidis would like to see you in his office. Now please. Her tone was off. Too careful. I drove to the office, my mind racing through scenarios. Had Patterson already made his move? Had he contacted Petros? When I walked into Petra's office, I knew immediately something was wrong. He stood at the windows, shoulders tight with tension I'd never seen before. Close the door, he said without turning around. I did. James Patterson called you today. Not a question. A statement. How did you know? I know everything that happens around you. He finally turned, and his expression was harder than I'd ever seen. What did he say? He threatened to use my employment here against you in the waterfront bid. What else? That's all. He hung up after, Don't lie to me, Charlotte. What else did he say? The edge in his voice triggered something defensive in me. That's everything. And how do you know? He called. Are you monitoring my phone? I'm protecting you. By invading my privacy? We had an agreement, Petros. Boundaries. Boundaries change when someone threatens you. He didn't threaten me. He threatened you. He threatened you the moment he said your name. Petros moved to his desk and pressed a button on his phone. Send them in. The door opened. 2 men entered, both wearing dark suits, both carrying themselves like military, not security guards. Something else. This is Andreas and Dmitri, Petros said. They'll be providing protection for you, and Grace starting immediately. My stomach dropped. Excuse me. Patterson isn't just a bitter ex-boss, Charlotte. He's connected to people who don't stop at phone threats. You need protection. I need you to consult me before assigning bodyguards to my daughter. This isn't negotiable. And there it was. The type 8 in him, bulldozing over my autonomy because he decided what was best. Everything is negotiable, I said coldly. That's what boundaries mean. You don't get to make unilateral decisions about my life. I get to keep you safe. No, you get to offer protection. I get to decide whether to accept it. We stared at each other across the desk. The 2 bodyguards stood silently by the door, professional enough to pretend they weren't witnessing their boss being challenged. Charlotte, Petros said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Then, explain it to me. Patterson and Brown isn't just competing with us for projects. They're fronting for the Volkov family, Russian organized crime. They've been trying to get a foothold in Boston's waterfront development for years. If they're bringing you into this, it means they see you as leverage. The room tilted slightly. You're saying I'm in danger from the Russian Mafia because I work for you? I'm saying you might be, which means protection isn't optional. I thought about Grace, about her walking home from school, about Mrs. Rivera's apartment with its flimsy locks. My type 1 brain wanted all the information, wanted to research the Volkov family, understand the threat level, make a properly informed decision based on complete data. But my mother's heart just wanted Grace safe. Fine, I said. But they stay out of sight. Grace doesn't need to know she has bodyguards. She's 5. Agreed. And you tell me everything from now on. No more surprises. If I'm in danger, I deserve to know why. Petros nodded to Andreas and Dmitri. Wait outside. After they left, he came around the desk. I should have told you about the Volkov connection earlier, but I didn't want to frighten you. I'm not fragile, Petros. I'm a single mother who's been blacklisted and threatened. I can handle the truth. I'm learning that. He stopped just short of touching me. But that doesn't mean I won't do everything in my power to protect you, even if I don't want your protection. Especially then. The intensity in his eyes made something in my chest tighten. This wasn't about control, not really. This was about something deeper, something that terrified me more than Russian mobsters. This was about him caring. I need to pick up Grace, I said, stepping back before I could do something stupid like reach for him. Andreas will follow you. Dmitri will secure your apartment building. I nodded, and left before the walls could close in completely. But I couldn't leave it alone. That night, after Grace fell asleep, I did what I always did when the world didn't make sense. I researched Volkov family, Russian organized crime in Boston, waterfront development, and then, because I couldn't help myself, Diamantidis family, Greek, organized crime. What I found made my blood run cold. Petros hadn't lied about having other interests. His family didn't just operate in gray areas. They operated in black, money laundering through construction projects, protection rackets, territorial disputes with rival families, including the Volkovs. I was staring at a photo of Petros from 3 years ago, standing outside a courthouse after being questioned about a warehouse fire that killed 2 people, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. Hello. Miss Delmer, there's been an incident. You need to come to this address immediately. The voice was Andreas. Alone. Don't tell anyone. He gave me an address in South Boston, a warehouse district. Every instinct screamed this was a trap. But what if it wasn't? What if something had happened, and Petros was in trouble? I called Mrs. Rivera to stay with Grace, told her I had a work emergency, then I drove to the address, my hands shaking on the wheel. The warehouse was dark except for a single light in a side door. I parked and walked toward it. My phone clutched like a weapon. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open and saw Petros standing in the center of a huge empty space. He wasn't alone. 3 men knelt on the concrete floor in front of him. Their hands were bound behind their backs, blood on their faces, and Petros held a gun. Charlotte, he said without turning around. You shouldn't be here. Andreas called, said there was an incident. Andreas didn't call you. His voice was flat, cold, nothing like the man who'd helped me wash dishes. One of them did, using his phone after they took him. One of the kneeling men looked up at me, young, maybe 25, terrified. Please, he said. He's going to kill us. Petros, I whispered. What is this? This is business. He finally turned to look at me. His eyes were empty. This is who I am when I'm not in a boardroom, when I'm not pretending to be civilized. Where's Andreas? In the hospital. They broke his arm in 3 places trying to get to you. The young man on the floor spoke again. We weren't going to hurt her. Just scare her. Make her quit. That's all. The sound of the gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. I screamed. The bullet had hit the concrete 2 inches from the young man's head. He collapsed forward, sobbing. Petra's hand was steady. His expression hadn't changed. You broke my man's arm, he said quietly. You terrorized someone under my protection. You made the catastrophic mistake of thinking I would let that go unanswered. Petros, please. I didn't know what I was begging for. For him to stop. For him to not be this person. For this to not be real. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and something flickered in his eyes. Something human beneath the cold. Leave, Charlotte. Go home. Lock your doors. Tomorrow we'll talk about what happens next. I can't just leave you here to... Yes, you can. He turned back to the kneeling men. And you will. Because if you stay, you'll see things that will change how you look at me forever. And I'm not ready for that yet. I should have stayed. Should have insisted. Should have done something other than what I did. But I ran. I ran to my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I drove home on autopilot, my mind replaying the sound of that gunshot, the emptiness in Petros's eyes, the blood on the concrete floor. I'd known he operated in shadows. I'd accepted that intellectually, but seeing him hold a gun to someone's head without hesitation, that was different. That was real. When I got home, Mrs. Rivera took one look at my face and asked if I was okay. I lied, said I was fine, paid her and locked the door behind her. Then I checked on Grace, sleeping peacefully in her bed, completely unaware that her mother had just watched the man who'd become important to them both transform into someone terrifying. I sat on my couch in the dark and finally let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. I'd known the truth. Intellectually, abstractly, but knowing and seeing were 2 different things. And I didn't know if I could unsee what I'd just witnessed. I didn't know if I could work for him, be near him, trust him. I didn't know anything anymore except that every rule I'd ever believed in had been shattered in a single gunshot, and I had no idea how to put the pieces back together. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the gun in Petros's hand, heard the gunshot, saw the emptiness in his eyes. By morning, I'd made a decision. I was done. Finished. I'd send my resignation email, finish the Sustainable Development Project, remotely, and find another job. Any job. Even if it meant going back to 47 rejections. At least I'd be able to look at myself in the mirror. Grace woke up at 7, chipper and oblivious. I made her breakfast with shaking hands, packed her lunch, walked her to school like it was any normal day. Except nothing was normal anymore. When I got back to the apartment, I opened my laptop and started typing the resignation email. Dear Mr. Diamantidis. Effective immediately. My phone rang. Petros. I declined the call. It rang again. Declined. Text message. We need to talk. I typed back. There's nothing to talk about. I'm resigning. Don't make decisions based on fear. I'm making decisions based on principles. Something you wouldn't understand. 3 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. Of course he came. I opened it to find Petros standing in my hallway, looking like he hadn't slept either, still wearing yesterday's suit tie loosened, shadows under his eyes. You need to leave, I said. Not until we talk. There's nothing to say. I saw who you really are. I can't work for someone who... I couldn't even finish the sentence. Who what? Who protects what's his? Who doesn't let threats go unanswered? Who holds a gun to someone's head without hesitation? They tried to hurt you, Charlotte. They broke Andreas's arm getting information about where you live, where Grace goes to school. What did you expect me to do? File a police report? I expected you to be better than them. The words hung in the air between us. I'm not better than them, Petros said quietly. I never pretended to be. I told you what my family does. You said you could accept it. I thought I could. But accepting it in theory and seeing it in practice are 2 different things. He stepped closer to the doorway, not inside, respecting that boundary even now. Did I kill them? I blinked. What? Did I kill those men? After you left? Did I execute them? I don't know. I left. I didn't. I broke the fingers they used to hurt Andreas. I made it very clear what would happen if they ever came near you again. Then I let them go. You still shot at them. You terrified them. You enjoyed it. Yes, he admitted without shame. I did. Because fear is a language men like that understand. Mercy they see as weakness. If I'd been soft, if I'd let it slide, you'd have 10 more attempts on you by now. I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him there was another way. A right way, a way that followed rules and laws and didn't involve guns in warehouses, but the type 1 in me, the part that had spent months being punished for doing things correctly, couldn't quite make that argument convincingly anymore. I have a daughter, I said instead. I can't expose her to this world, to violence and guns. Grace will never see what you saw. I give you my word. Your word. Like that means something after you lied about Andreas calling me. I didn't lie. I told you he was in the hospital. One of those men took his phone and used it to lure you there. I didn't know they'd done it until I saw you walk through that door. And if you had known, would you have warned me? He was quiet for a long moment. No, because I would have gone to get you myself, and that would have ended much worse for them. The honesty was somehow more disturbing than a lie would have been. I can't do this, I said. I can't be part of a world where violence is the first solution, where rules don't matter, where the right thing means nothing. The right thing got you fired and blacklisted. The right thing left you with $127 and nowhere to turn. At some point, Charlotte, you have to ask yourself if your rules are protecting you or just making you vulnerable to people who don't follow them. The words hit like a slap, because they were true. I need time, I said. I need to think. How much time? I don't know. Maybe forever. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe. But he nodded. Take what you need. The job will be here if you come back. If you don't, I'll have Sophia send you severance and references. He turned to leave, then stopped. Charlotte? Yes? I am who I am. I won't apologize for protecting what's mine, but I am sorry you had to see it. Sorry it scared you. Sorry it changed how you see me. After he left, I closed the door and slid down to sit on the floor. So why did I feel worse than before? Grace came home from school full of stories about her day. We made dinner together, read books, did her bedtime routine, and the whole time, all I could think about was Petrus's words. Your rules are protecting you, or just making you vulnerable. That night, I pulled out a notebook and did what I always did when the world didn't make sense. I made a list. Reasons to quit. Violence. Illegal activity. Moral compromise. Dangerous for Grace. Can't be part of that world. Reasons to stay. Grace has health insurance. I can pay rent. The work is good. Patterson doesn't win. Petros kept his word about everything except this. He protected me when no one else would. I stared at the lists. One was principled and correct. The other was practical and honest. The old Charlotte would have chosen principles without hesitation, but the old Charlotte had been destroyed by principles that didn't protect her. I thought about Grace's dance classes we could finally afford, about the doctor's appointment where I didn't panic about the bill, about work that challenged me and a boss who valued my skills, about a man who'd held a gun in a warehouse and still somehow made me feel safer than I'd felt in years. The thought terrified me, because it meant my moral compass, the thing I'd always relied on, was pointing in directions I didn't understand anymore. I fell asleep on the couch, the notebook still open, no decision made. When I woke up the next morning, there was a text from Petros sent at 3 a.m. Andreas is asking about you. He's worried, wants to know if you're okay. The man who'd had his arm broken protecting me was worried about whether I was okay. I typed back, "Tell him I'm fine, and thank you." Petros's response. "He says you're welcome, and that protecting you is an honor, not a burden." I sat with that for a long time. An honor, not a burden. People who followed all the rules had failed me, but people who broke them had protected me. What did that say about the world? About my rules? About everything I'd built my identity on? I didn't have answers, but I was starting to ask different questions. And maybe I was starting to realize asking different questions was the first step toward becoming a different person, one who could survive in gray, instead of always seeking black and white. One who could accept that sometimes the right thing wasn't the correct thing. One who could look at a man with blood on his hands and see someone worthy of trust anyway. I wasn't ready to go back yet, but I was starting to understand that maybe, just maybe, I wanted to. 3 days later, I walked into Diamantidis Construction at 9 a.m. Sophia looked up from her desk, surprise crossing her face before she smoothed it into professional neutrality. Miss Delmer, Mr. Diamantidis didn't mention you were coming in today. He doesn't know. Is he available? He's in a meeting. But I can't. I'll wait. I sat in the reception area for 40 minutes, watched people come and go, noticed Andrea standing near the elevators, his arm in a cast, but otherwise looking alert and professional. He saw me and nodded. I nodded back. When the meeting ended and executives filed out of Petros's office, Sophia gestured me in. Petros stood at his windows, hands in his pockets. He didn't turn when I entered. I'm back, I said. If you still want me. Why? Because Grace needs health insurance. Because I'm good at this work. Because James Patterson doesn't deserve to win. I paused. And because you were right. He turned then. About what? About my rules. They didn't protect me. They just made me an easy target for people who don't follow them. I set my bag down. I'm not saying I agree with everything you do. I'm not saying I'll ever be comfortable with guns in warehouses, but I'm saying I understand now that the world isn't black and white. It's not, he agreed quietly. So I'm choosing to work in the gray, with boundaries. Clear ones. I do the legitimate work. I don't ask about the rest. And Grace stays completely protected from all of it. Those terms are acceptable. And one more thing. I moved closer. I want to know when you're going to do something about Patterson, because I deserve to know, and I don't want any more surprises. A slow smile crossed Petros's face. I was planning to handle that today, actually. Would you like to be there? There where? Patterson and Brown's offices. I'm making a courtesy visit to discuss the waterfront project. Something in his tone told me it wouldn't be a typical business meeting. Yes, I said. I want to be there. 2 hours later, I sat in Petro's car as his driver pulled up to Patterson and Brown's building, the same building where I'd worked for 5 years, where I'd been humiliated, fired, destroyed. Andreas and Dmitri were in the car behind us. You don't have to come inside, Petros said. You can wait here. No, I want him to see me. I want him to know I'm not broken. We rode the elevator to the 8th floor. The receptionist's eyes widened when she saw me with Petros. Mr. Diamantidis to see James Patterson, Petros said. No appointment necessary. I'll need to check if he'll see me. The authority in his voice left no room for argument. 5 minutes later, we were in Patterson's office. He stood behind his desk, his face pale. Diamantidis, Charlotte. His eyes darted between us. What is this? This is me withdrawing from the waterfront project, Petros said calmly. You win. Congratulations. Patterson blinked. What? The project is yours. I'm sure you and your Volkov friends will do great things with it. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have any. Petros placed a folder on the desk. Financial records showing payments from Volkov shell companies to Patterson and Brown. Emails discussing profit sharing. Photos of you meeting with Dmitry Volkov at his club. He paused. I'm sure the FBI will find it all very interesting. Patterson's face went white. You can't. I already did. They're outside waiting to talk to you. But before they come in, I wanted to deliver a personal message. He moved around the desk with controlled precision. Patterson backed against the wall. You fired Charlotte Delmer because she had integrity you lack. You destroyed her reputation because she refused to compromise her principles. You threatened her to get to me. Petros's voice was quiet. Dangerous. And that was your critical mistake. I'll tell them you threatened me, that you... Tell them whatever you want. You're finished either way. The FBI investigation will destroy your firm. The Volkovs will assume you gave me their information. And when they come for you, I won't be there to protect you. Please, Patterson whispered. I have a family. So does Charlotte. You didn't care about that when you tried to use her as leverage. Petros stepped back and turned to me. Anything you'd like to say? I looked at James Patterson, the man who'd held power over my career, who'd punished me for having boundaries, who'd made me feel worthless for 6 months. He looked small now, terrified, broken. I should have felt satisfaction, triumph. Instead, I just felt tired. You told me I wasn't worth hiring, I said quietly, that I had professional conduct issues, that I was the problem. I straightened my shoulders, but I wasn't the problem. You were, and now everyone will know it. We left him there, waiting for the FBI. In the elevator, Petros asked, How do you feel? Honestly, I don't know. I thought I'd feel vindicated. Instead, I just feel relieved. Like I can finally move forward. That's healthier than vengeance, says the man who just destroyed someone's life. I destroyed a corrupt man's criminal enterprise. There's a difference. The elevator doors opened. As we walked to the car, I said thank you for doing that. Even though I don't fully agree with your methods. You're welcome. Even though you think my methods are wrong. I almost smiled. We're quite a pair. We are. He opened the car door for me. Charlotte? Yes? I'm glad you came back. So am I. And I meant it. That night I sat with Grace at bedtime. Mommy, are you happy now? She asked, the way children do, seeing things adults try to hide. I think I'm getting there, baby. Because of Mr. Petros? Partly. But mostly because I'm learning that being perfect isn't as important as being honest. What's the difference? I thought about it. About rules I'd followed that failed me. About gray areas I'd learned to navigate. About a man who broke laws but kept his word. Perfect means doing everything right, I said. Honest means accepting when things are complicated and choosing the best option anyway, even if it's not perfect. That sounds hard? It is. But I think it's better than pretending everything is simple when it's not. She thought about this seriously. I love you, Mommy. Even when you're not perfect. I pulled her close. I love you too, sweetheart. Always. After she fell asleep, I stood at my window looking out at Boston. Somewhere out there, Petros was probably working late, managing his empire of construction and shadows. I'd come back to work for him not because I had to, but because I'd chosen to. That choice didn't make me weak. It didn't make me complicit. It made me someone who'd learned to survive in a world that didn't follow the rules I'd been taught. And maybe, just maybe, it made me someone stronger than the person who'd walked into that cafe 6 weeks ago, desperate and broken, and clinging to principles that had failed to protect her. I wasn't that person anymore. I was someone new. Someone who could work in the gray. Someone who could accept imperfection and still maintain integrity. Someone who was finally, after everything, learning how to be both honest and whole. The Volkov retaliation came 2 weeks later. I was working from home when Petros called. His voice was tight with controlled urgency. Pack a bag for you and Grace. Andreas is on his way. You're coming to my estate until this is resolved. The old Charlotte would have argued, would have demanded to know every detail before agreeing, would have insisted on maintaining her independence. The new Charlotte heard the fear beneath his control and said, "How long do we have?" 20 minutes. Maybe less. We'll be ready. I hung up and moved with calm efficiency, grabbed Grace's favorite stuffed animal, clothes for 3 days, her medications, then my laptop, documents. Essential. Grace appeared in the doorway. Mommy? What's happening? I knelt to her level. Remember how I told you that sometimes grown-ups have to be flexible? That perfect isn't as important as safe? She nodded. We're going to stay with Mr. Petros for a few days. It'll be an adventure. Like a sleepover? Exactly like that. Andreas arrived in 16 minutes. We were in the car in 18. Petros's estate was 40 minutes outside Boston. Gates. Guards. A house that looked more like a fortress. He met us at the door, and the relief on his face when he saw us was unmistakable. You're safe, he said, and I realized he'd been terrified we wouldn't get here in time. That night, after Grace fell asleep in a guest room 3 times the size of our apartment, Petros and I stood on the terrace overlooking his property. The Volkovs sent a message, he said quietly. They wanted me to know they could reach you, that my protection wasn't enough. But it was enough. We're here. This time. But Charlotte, this is my world. Threats. Retaliation. Constant vigilance. If you stay, if you choose this, it won't ever be completely safe. I thought about the woman I'd been 2 months ago. The one who believed rules would protect her. Who thought doing everything correctly meant safety. That woman was gone. Nothing is completely safe, I said. Patterson taught me that. The legitimate world destroyed me just as thoroughly as the criminal one could have. So what are you saying? I turned to face him. I'm saying I choose this. I choose you. Not because it's safe or correct, or what I'm supposed to do, but because you've kept every promise you made. Because you see me as an equal, not a possession. Because when I needed protection, you didn't hesitate. Charlotte. And because I'm falling in love with you, which is terrifying and complicated and probably the least perfect decision I've ever made. He pulled me close, his hands framing my face. I fell in love with you the moment you told me off in my office for investigating your past. You were fierce and principled, and completely unafraid of my power. I'm still afraid sometimes. Good. Fear keeps you smart. He kissed me then, deep and claiming. But you're mine now, and I protect what's mine. I'm not a possession, Petros. No. You're my partner, my equal, the woman who chose me knowing exactly who I am. We stood there as night fell over his fortress. Two people who'd learned the world wasn't black and white, that love didn't follow rules, and that sometimes the most honest choice was the most complicated one. Grace appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Mommy, is this our home now? I looked at Petros. He looked at me. For now, I said. Is that okay? She considered this seriously. Does Mr. Petros have ice cream? He laughed, the sound genuine and free. I'll have every flavor delivered tomorrow. Then I think it's okay. She went back to bed, satisfied with this simple logic. Out of the mouths of babes, Petros said. She's smarter than both of us. Clearly, we stood together in the darkness, and I knew this was just the beginning. There would be more threats, more complications, more moments when I'd have to choose between perfect and honest. But I also knew I wouldn't face them alone, and that made all the difference.